Hey there, entrepreneur, and welcome to today's show. Happy holiday season, folks. I have someone who is here to help you. Today's guest is Mia Moran, who is a mom of three, coach and best-selling author who makes time for wellness, motherhood, and really amazing work, which I can attest to, and shows time-strapped women how they can do that too. She's also the host of the Plan Simple podcast with 250 plus episodes, which shout out to that, Mia, because I know how hard that is. And she frequently guests on podcasts and has been on all three major TV networks multiple times. So Mia, welcome to the show today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation.
I'm excited for this conversation. And I think, lots of people are going to benefit just because of what you put out in the world all the time. So before we jump into the topic, just let people know a little bit about your journey, especially as it relates to adversity or resilience or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. So I have always been an entrepreneur, but not in this space. I started off as a graphic designer and built a pretty big graphic design studio at one point in my career. And it was in that time that I had three kids. And I don't know, like those mamas who after babies nursing makes their bodies go back, that was not me. So I had three kids in a row and I just kept living in a bigger and bigger body. I something just wasn't right. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I just had, by the time my third kid came around, besides just the fact that having three kids is exhausting, I just had no energy. And I just remember this day of it was 3:00 and I was staring at my computer screen, and I generally ended my days kind of early, but I was looking across my desk at this stack of Starbucks coffee cups that had added up over the course of the day. And I just remember being okay, first of all, it's 3:00. How have I been to Starbucks this many times, in the day? Yeah. And second of all, if I've actually consumed this much coffee, then how am I so freaking tired? Yeah. Because I was just exhausted. And so that kind of kickstarted my journey into understanding that I actually had a little bit more control over my energy than I thought I did. And just getting myself back to health, which it was a very organic process, which then just led to a book and led to me becoming a coach and creating what we do now. But it all started because I literally, at the time that I decided I needed to change my health, if you had told me to go to the grocery store and find kale, I would have cried. I don't even think I knew, I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to make toast, cooking, food, wellness, none of this was in my wheelhouse at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a lot of people, especially pre-kids, not gonna lie, because it's a lot of takeout. It's a lot of, just, whatever you can make on the fly or whatever you can order prepped or and stuff like that. But there is something that happens, when you do have kids, and those who are listening who may not, bear with us here, because I promise there's stuff in here for you as well.
100%.
Yeah. So tell us about when you made that jump from, because I know you did, like you said, you had a pretty successful, agency or graphic design firm. So what happened to make you go from there to here? How did that happen?
So it happened gradually. It happened. So at the time it was over 10 years ago. And it's so amazing to me what has happened to the internet in 10 years, but that's a whole other episode. but at the time they're just I was trying to get all healthy, and all the people I was learning from were, it didn't look pretty. It looked like mush. And, nothing was I didn't really relate with anything I was seeing. I was I don't know, a city mom, and I was seeing all these really hippie whatever sites by men. It wasn't even by women. And nothing was pretty. And anyway, so I just started, as I learned, I just started making things because I had a design company. And it was this gradual process that at some point everyone's what are you doing all day?
You're I don't know, running a company, maybe, kind of, sort of,
Exactly. And I just realized I was sort of creating this really expensive hobby, and that perhaps I should start migrating things. So we figured out how to migrate different pieces of the company and find people different things to do. And so then I sort of removed myself slowly. And I was also, at the time, we lived in the city, and I was trying to get out of the city with the kids. So it was kind of a good breaking point. And then in terms of this business, it really was like I started writing, I started designing things, I made a magazine, and eventually over time, I stepped into really becoming a coach and teaching. And
Yeah.
here we are.
Nice. Nice. I mean, exactly like what you were saying though, because I came out of kind of that agency-ish graphic
Yeah.
designing world as well. And it is not necessarily, at least 10 years ago, I can't speak to what it is right now, but it was not necessarily conducive to a healthy lifestyle.
No. Oh my gosh. I don't think it is now either. I was thinking like, oh, I should go back and like enlighten
Yeah.
or talk to some people in that
Yeah.
situation.
I
Yeah,
mean, I
no, it
just
was
remember
not at
like
all.
unlimited snacks, unlimited soda, caffeine everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
like it was like
Well,
a
and
lifestyle
clearly
that you lived.
Starbucks was nearby, right? Like,
Yeah,
'cause-
exactly.
yeah.
Right. And I mean, coffee runs all the time. Or I even remember during one Q4, like taking shots, like in the office,
Yeah.
right? Like, because I think it was just kind of part of the culture. That was
Yeah.
that work hard, play hard
Yes.
mentality. And then you
Yeah.
run out of runway to do
Yes.
either.
Yes.
Right. To
Yes.
your point.
That is
Um,
definitely there.
which I mean, I think a lot of people are kind of feeling right now, especially our moms out there. I mean, parents too, but I'm gonna speak to my moms because I am one right now. But on your website, you blatantly state, women have the power to change the future, but not if they're stressed out and exhausted, which I am a big believer of. I think nobody can do it from that point of view. So today I just really want to dive into, because we are recording this and airing this right in the middle of the holiday season. And a lot of us are already running on empty. So how can we go forward into all of this if we're already depleted?
Oh, magic. You have to get on depleted. You
I
have to
know,
put
but
yourself first.
there's so much to do.
I know, but you have to put yourself first for like even just 5 minutes. Like this is the thing I've learned about time, doing a lot of work with just how time works and
Yeah.
how women work and how we've kind of been explained a different version of time of how I think it actually really works. But I think a lot of times we think like, well, we work, 8 or 10 hours a day or whatever we're doing. And then we, have to go home and be with our family. And then there's all this holiday, like our lists are like really long with all the
Yeah.
things we think we have to do. And I think we just imagine that taking care of ourselves actually takes that much time, but it's not
Yeah.
really about time. It's about filling ourselves up. So it can be little things, but we have to pause and do them.
Yes.
Um, and it's mostly, I find, especially around all things mothering, holidays, like all the triggering things,
Yeah.
it's really about just grounding yourself and just like connecting into right now. And because from that perspective, all the craziness isn't really like there. You can't
Yeah.
hold all those things at once.
Yeah.
And so we have to do it. We just like and the first time that you put yourself first, it can feel like you're coming out of your skin.
Yeah. Super uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super uncomfortable, but the rewards come really quickly. Like the reward comes like, you know, you start to notice. It's like more of a noticing. I mean, it takes some, it's a practice. So it takes some like practicing and noticing. And like you might reflect that night, like, oh, like usually I'm really, yelly with the kids, or usually I always get in a fight with my spouse. But like, oh, I took that one deep breath and now like this afternoon was a little bit better. Like, so you
Yeah.
sort of have to really become aware of
Mhm.
what's going on.
And awareness, I would assume the step one, like you were saying, is to slow down long enough to be aware. Whereas I
Exactly.
think people, you tend to get stuck, especially if you're in crisis, or especially in your kind of that go, 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 go mode, that it's hard to turn it off, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, like the first, like just step that everyone can go take is, I think a lot of us, if we open our calendars and we look at them, especially in the holiday time, it's like work. And then that backs right up to like going to the mall maybe and like grabbing stuff or going to get a kid or,
Yeah.
everything's backed into each other. So literally something we can do is just create space, like just claim time for nothing.
Yeah.
And you're going to end up doing something in that time, but you're going to end up really responding to what you need
Yeah.
instead of like what the outside has told you need, which is what ends up usually in your calendar.
Yeah. And I think in that time, like, I like how you said, like, because I can hear everyone be like, free space on my calendar. Like, holy crap, that makes me anxious. Right. So I get it. But to your point, you probably end up doing something, but it goes to a need and not a have to, or an
Yes.
obligation, or, maybe you'll check something off your list that makes you feel better because it was the biggest impact for the lowest amount of effort or something, who knows? But so once we kind of sit down and we clear the time, how do you handle when other people's opinions of you clearing the time, right? Because everybody, you clear it and it's a shift, and everyone else has to shift along with it sometimes.
Yes. And I would say to that, mostly you have to shift because you're the one who has to not care what other
Yeah.
people are saying. Because other people may or may not be saying things about your time. I actually find that usually a lot of that is also, we've made that up in our head. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
like they must not be okay. The kids must not be okay if I'm not right there to be with them right now. Or, you know, work must not be okay if I take an extra half an hour, like at the end of the day to get home. Like
Yeah.
no one's
Yeah.
actually thinking those things. We're thinking those things about ourselves. So I think a lot of times it's our own inner work, like inner dialogue that's really wreaking havoc. But something you said about it feels really uncomfortable when you make the time. I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So when I look back at making this big change in my own health, I was like, how did I even get there? Like, how did I even get to a point where it was so bad that like seven
Yeah.
cups of coffee had no effect on me? And the truth is I stopped feeling.
Yeah.
So like, I wasn't
Numb.
even letting myself get uncomfortable. So like, uncomfortable is kind of like a glass of wine. Like, I mean, not like filling up your schedule is kind of like having glasses of wine or having cups of coffee. Like it's like the same,
Numbing.
same thing. It's like a way to buffer feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is something that a lot of us are doing right now because of the pandemic, because of, before it was like when things came to a screeching halt, we all kind of were like, oh crap, now we have to deal with our emotions because we're sitting in them. So then there became a numbing. So now there's kind of this coming out that I'm at least seeing around a lot of clients where, there's only so far you can numb until, like, to your point, you have that luckily you have that wake up moment, or your relationships get impacted or things start to crumble around you, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's interesting because like there's actually not, I mean, especially if you have a coach or a therapist or support or community, like there's nothing wrong with crumbling. And
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean, part of it is that like I think we hold on so tightly to feeling good, and that really
Yeah.
comes up around the holidays because there's been this like picture that's been created that's on like the cover of every magazine we see every time we're in the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
of like what it looks like, and we've assumed what that feels like, and so we just grasp it so tightly and we're scared to just fall apart for 2 seconds, like we're gonna like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know what we're
Yeah.
scared of, but it's scary.
Yeah. And I think it allows people around you to have empathy and to support you. Whereas there is the very much like you were just saying, I was just cracking up because I hear it from clients a lot too, is that like thing in your head, like nothing will operate if I take 15 minutes. And part of me wants to go, not about you that much. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
right?
Like,
Like it's amazing.
but it's like a part of, like, we try to validate ourselves with that. Like, oh, well, the kids can't survive without me, or the kids won't be okay if I don't get them X, Y, and Z for Christmas and this and that. And yeah, on some levels, maybe, but like maybe your coworkers, your kids, whoever would be better if you were a functioning, mentally stable human, right? Like, yikes.
Well, and the funny thing is if we went and told the whole story about how much we mean, I think most of us wouldn't be able to tell that story either. So
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, just telling the story of like, they need me this much, that like, if I'm not there for this half hour, like something is major is going to happen. But like, really, none of us, I don't think, would be able to tell that story, authentically either.
Right. Right. I mean, because I think it comes from a place of quasi insecurity,
Yeah.
right? Like it's in this weird middle ground of they need me. See, they need me. Like, and it's you say that so you can prove it to yourself. So in around and around we go, while completely avoiding the fact that you need yourself more
Yes.
in that story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're, this is just cracking me up on so many levels because I'm like hearing certain clients and hearing myself through stuff, through conversations as we're talking about this. So, so I've taken the moment, I've slowed down long enough to, put it on my calendar. How much time are we talking? Like, cause I think
I
that's
mean,
the
we
first.
don't really. So, okay. So this is the most important thing. So you've slowed down, you've opened up some time, like just do it once, just for like,
Yeah.
I don't know, find a time like for half an hour. But here's the thing, it's going to be uncomfortable for
Mm-hmm.
most of us to like, even if you're like, if you're like, okay, during this time, I can't, go shopping for Christmas presents, like, like think about what's for dinner. Like if you sort of make some parameters around it, like this is really like meant to be restorative time.
Yeah.
That does not mean, by the way, that you have to go get a pedicure or manicure in this
Thank you. I
time.
was just thinking that. Thank you.
You might need a shower. Like it actually might be restorative. Like sometimes it is restorative to send an email, like, but you really have to tune in with yourself and just be like, what is it that I really need right now? Like not what I feel my client needs, not what I feel I'm supposed to get my husband, but I don't really have an idea yet for what to get him for the holiday. Like, like all these things, like even like these thoughts of like, I need to start this new, like, I need to go to the gym, like all these things. None of that is the one rule I have around real self-care is that you can't beat yourself up about it. Like the first step in self-care is like, you're not beating yourself up.
Yeah.
So many of us, yeah, right. Like so many of us like have these self-care lists that we like beat ourselves up with because we're not actually doing them. So like that's kind of like rule one. But the reason to open up some space is this: it's going to be really uncomfortable and something's going to come up around that, like that you maybe should be doing something, or that like you're actually sad that you're not with the people you want to be for the holidays, or you're stressed around money and like it's coming up right now, like so something will come up. And here's the cool thing, like if you're really truly in the moment feeling a feeling, there's different schools of thought for how long you can actually feel it. But like the most one I've heard is 90 seconds. I've heard 30 seconds to 90 seconds. So like if you're truly feeling sad and sad is causing you to do something. So I'm talking about like what happens to us normally is like we feel sad, we grab the cookies before the 90 seconds even ends. We feel sad, we pick up the phone and reach out to somebody who is not nurturing to us.
Right.
We feel angry and we yell at a kid instead of feeling angry, right? So I'm not talking about like that you'll never feel this thing again, but usually we react and try to like fill the space within 90 seconds. So if you actually use the 90 seconds, it passes.
Right.
And then usually you're in a space where you're like, what you actually really need. Like, actually, I really need to just take a nap for 20 minutes, or actually, I really need to go on a walk and get fresh air. Like you can really hear at that moment what you actually need. Whereas before it's a little bit foggy, which is why I like the open space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a big proponent of that as well. And that's one of the first things I work with clients on as well. Is like, where's the white space? Because something is inevitably going to come up. Something needs to be addressed with you, or just to your point. I love that 90-second kind of parameter, because anyone can do something for 90 seconds. It might feel like a long 90 seconds, right, when you're in it, but at least you can, have that kind of parameter in your head of, I can do it, because I think some people don't even think that they can hold space for the emotions because they've tried it and it didn't, quote unquote, didn't work, or it made them too uncomfortable. That the trigger happened, right?
A timer I find is really helpful, because like you're like, oh my gosh, like I can sit here for 90 seconds. Here's another little like just tweak to white space, which is I have a physical planner, and so I have people time block a lot, like different, what you're doing, including sort of this notion of open space. And so I used to always have it left blank, but I realized that wasn't like intentionally like making the space. Like by leaving it blank, it almost felt like there was an opportunity to fill
default.
So we started calling it gold space, because you couldn't actually draw white space. And then people would get like a gold, or, and if they were doing it electronically, they'd do yellow, and they'd create the space. So when you open your calendar, you can see like the actual open space popping
Right.
out.
Yeah, that's
Kind of, you
beautiful. I
start to
mean,
see
gold
it. Yeah.
space, I'll take that all day, right? Because you're exactly right. If I open it up and I'm like, there's a space here. My first thought is usually like, well, what's missing? What did I forget to
Yes.
put on that spot? I'm like, this seems a little weird that there's, a couple hours of free time here. Like, what did I do wrong? But then also this notion, like you were saying before, around self-care. I feel like a lot of people nowadays have an agenda when it comes to self-care
Yeah.
or something that they want to accomplish, right? You have to like achieve a goal. My self-care is I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to, for 30 days straight or all of this stuff. And then it sets into like this all or nothing thinking pattern as well that comes with that. I mean, do you see that too, where goal
Yeah.
oriented self-care is not necessarily
100%. Like, and it's not like oriented self-care. I mean, sometimes I feel like we need a plan to, to really take care of ourselves once we
yeah.
figure it out. But we always have to be doing this work of like, how is this actually taking care of me? And, how can I fit this in and how can I do it in a nurturing way? One of the reasons I love thinking through sort of goals and time in 90 days is
Mm-hmm.
because I think especially as women or people, um, you know, I mean, really it's with everyone, but when you have kids in school, you really notice like that
Yeah.
seasons are just different.
Yes. Yep.
And it happens like there's different kinds of seasons. There's like the actual seasons of the year. There's sort of the season you are in your career. There's
Yes.
the season your kids are in. There's the season for women that you're in sort of hormonally. Like there's all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of seasons that we
Yeah.
exist
Yeah.
in. And I think a lot of times when our goals are coming from like what we think we're supposed to have, we're actually out of alignment with the season that we're in, which,
Mm-hmm.
the holiday season is another season, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Great.
so many times we're like, we should do this, but it like literally doesn't fit in to the season. I mean, actually, one of the reasons that I think we get so out of alignment in the holiday season is because I think there's a very natural instinct to want to sort of go inward and be more soulful in this
Yes.
time.
Agreed. Yep.
And the whole outside world is telling us to like have parties and like have
Yeah.
all these presents and like do all these things. And it's not necessarily always in alignment with what we're needing.
Yeah, because I mean, when you think about it, to your point, like we're stepping into winter, right? We're
Yeah.
stepping into kind of the season when everything else, at least here in New England, kind of goes dormant and goes into that space of rest, rejuvenation, inward thinking and
Yeah.
reflection, stuff like that. And I love that cracks me up what you just said, like go have a party and go this. Even in times of COVID, it was like workaround of having said huge party. Now let's put you on a screen with the Brady Bunch windows of parties. Like, so there's so much of that, not to mention introvert's nightmare and a lot
Yes.
of that as well. Right. So, as people are kind of stepping into, because we're in this weird season right now too, because we're half in COVID, half maybe not in COVID, not really sure, where people are coming out and they have a different definition. I think a lot of light bulbs went off for people, but it's very much easier to kind of backslide into the expectations, right? And maybe you won't if you do slow down, like you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and what I usually say about planning is it's just deciding in advance.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are like, I'm not really a planner because like that just seems too rigid. But really all it is actually tapping into what it can be is
Yeah.
tapping into your knowing, like your intuition, and just deciding that this is how I want to show up. Um, and then making that happen, which for a lot of us, especially as you mentioned, introverted people or
Yeah.
like people really like trying to live on purpose, which I know your audience is, then a lot of like what normally comes up is out of alignment with that. And so we actually do kind of have to make a plan of like, one of the things I love doing is it's like, okay, great. Like this night we can go out and we can actually decide that we want to be with all these people because they're family or whatever. And this is
Yeah.
how they do it. And then I can also decide that then for the next 2 days, we're just like home by the fire because
Yeah.
that's how we actually take care of ourselves after as in a whole bunch of introverts going out and doing
Yeah.
all these things that other people want us to do.
Yeah. And it's remembering that like you said, like you have a choice. I
Yeah.
think this time of year, especially, people forget that they can choose. And a lot of the things that are rooted in, holiday traditions and different things like that, nobody ever stops long enough to kind of reevaluate and say, hey, wait, just because this has worked the past, I don't know, 10 years, maybe are we in a different season of life? What works for my kids when they're 2 is different than what works for us when they're 10 and 12 seasonally. So I would assume that when you're sitting down with somebody and you're saying, let's plan it out, it's also a game plan around resetting expectations with others around some of that stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I want to go back to too, because I know this is airing like, it's going to be like the holidays are upon us. And so a lot of people listening might be like, well, I'm already like doing that.
True,
and I've already said yes. I've already bought all the presents, and it's feeling a little out of alignment. So I just want to respond to that a little, because what you can do is just decide how you want to feel. So you can decide I actually want, and it's different for everybody. It's really, I think one of the other things we assume is that everyone is the same, which is so not true. It's like what media wants us to believe, but not true. And I've had different years of wanting to feel different ways, either internally or because of what's going on with the kid or whatever. But at this time of year, what I hear a lot is I want to feel connected to other people or to myself. I want to feel joy. I want to feel just like that, whatever, I just want to be cocooned and not, I just want to be alone. I hear that sometimes. So it really depends on who you are and what phase you're in. And the cool thing is that even if you're wanting to sort of have a more inward thing and you've already said yes to Aunt Maple for going to her house on Christmas or whatever. You can still ask yourself, you can still make a plan and you can still be okay, I'm doing this thing. I'm going here. How can I be let's say health is one of your words. How can I go here and really stay true to my health? And you make a plan, and maybe you decide I'm just going to have 1 glass of wine and 4 cups of water after, or, maybe you decide that you're going to feed yourself a huge salad before you go, talking food stuff. Maybe you decide that you can only go for an hour and a half. There's lots of different ways that we can actually be in control. And I think we forget.
We do, because people look at it as, oh, I have a choice or I don't. But regardless of whether or not you can choose a situation, to your point, you can choose how you feel when you are in that situation. And I love the fact that you're saying make the plan. I've heard that a lot around, mental health stuff and weight loss, and all different things around scripting, right? If you're going to walk into a room and somebody's going to ask you about X situation, have an auto response, so that you're scripted and planned when you're walking in, or time box your stay, or, different things like that. And then, because I think what often happens, and maybe you can weigh in on this too, is that people end up kind of betraying themselves. In those moments, in that attempt to please or, not rock the boat, they betray themselves, and then you feel like crap even more.
Well, and I think that is what always has made us feel like crap, right? I think that's behind all of it. It's never anyone else's fault.
Right. Right. We betray ourselves. We are our own worst kind of enemy in that. And then it just perpetuates the cycle of, I betray myself and what my true intentions are. And then I beat myself up. And then I betray myself again, and so on and so forth. But to your point, for those people who are already in the season, I think what comes very closely after the Christmas, Hanukkah, this kind of season is the New Year, New You season, as I like to call it, right? So Jan 1 comes, right? And there's a whole other kind of pressure that comes with that sometimes too, right?
Yeah. So around here, the reason that this is my favorite season actually has less to do. I mean, it's funny because I show up and I teach all this stuff about how to plan present giving and gift giving and how to do food and all this stuff. But really the motivation for me is how do we create a bridge into the next year? Because I think what a lot of us do is we just give up on December 1st. It's just done. Agreed. We're done. But no matter when you're listening to this, if you just step back, or step up, let's say a little bit, just the view from above, and you're okay, the way that I'm going right now, I'm going to be a lot of steps farther backwards from where I keep dreaming I want to be
Yes.
next year because of these 3 weeks.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's like, it's like
3 weeks, it can. And that's exactly how it feels. And then all of a sudden it's like, and now improve yourself on Jan 1, and all that messaging hits you. And you're like, holy crap, I've been like keeping the world together for 3 weeks. So now you want me to fix myself. Cool. Like,
right. And it's like, you're even like farther out of alignment.
yes.
So that's why I think just even in December, and I'm going to go into January in a sec, because I think it's really important actually to acknowledge January 1st, but definitely in December, like the more that you can be leaning into how you want to feel and be in whatever in, you know, your future self, like if you can figure out how to feel that way with it, like while you're navigating all these holiday moments, you've actually like created muscle in your, you know, thought and heart in a way that's like so powerful. Like you're going to be 5 steps ahead of your goal come January, because you've started to practice like boundaries around your energy and around what you want to put in your body and around, you know, how you're feeling. And it's like a really powerful practice, especially when we're being like tested a little bit. But the thing I want to say about January 1st is I hate real dates, actually. Like, I just like, I hate our calendar. And like, especially for women, I always like, I try to just like pull us into as many other like times as possible, including like the moons and seasons, just because I feel like the idea that there's weekdays and weekends is really hard for entrepreneurs and even harder for mothers.
Yes, agreed.
Like, because some of my best working days were Saturdays when my kids were little, you know, and it's like, why is that wrong? So that's like, so I just think we have to like get out of time a little. The idea that the first of every month is like a thing, it just doesn't make sense. And New Year's, I think, is that times 10, because what I would say like human, but definitely mother, is ready to like start on January 1st.
No, because like, we should be going inward seasonally.
Like we should go inward. Like some of us are still having people home that aren't normally home. Like it's just not a start date. It's like, it's just like, it just makes no sense. It's like that whole month of January. So what I love inviting people to do is really like almost plan this bridge and just decide in advance. Like I actually love when the Chinese New Year comes, because it's like, I just think it's better timing. It's it's usually the end of January, the beginning of February. And I'm just like, you know, I'm going to let myself land in the new year. Like I'm going to let myself transition. We very rarely think of transitions when we're planning. And so I think the more we can be like, this is actually a transition period into what I want to create in 2022, and just be like, okay with the fact that like, actually, it's probably going to make us more successful towards whatever goals we're setting if we allow for ourselves to transition into them.
Yeah,
really
no, I love that. I love that so much, because I think maybe it's the coach in me, right? Because we're always goal setting and we're always looking at people. And we're always trying to speak about people being their best selves and all of this other stuff. And then this arbitrary, like, do it on Jan 1. Like I've always been kind of like, well, that's a shit ton of pressure. Like, oh, okay. Like, let me, you know, put my presents away and, you know, break up my treadmill, right? Like it just feels like so much pressure to be under. I love your Chinese New Year thing, by the way, that you just mentioned for folks too. And that notion of building a bridge, and you can do that at any time. And I mean, for myself, I particularly like doing it come spring and fall, those transition seasons for me. I don't know about you, tend to be the more productive ones.
Yeah. We actually run our programs like not on the real quarters, but on like, we always create bridges, because I actually think that's the hardest. Like, I think that like, it's weird that we like go from like quarter to quarter or thing to thing in a calendar, and there's like never any transition. And I think it's where a lot of us run into problems, just like on a daily basis. It's like, okay, work ends here, and then I'm supposed to pick up so-and-so here. And it's like, but then I haven't even accounted for the fact it takes me 25 minutes to get there. Like we do that all the time.
We do. And the energy shift. Like I've worked with a lot of clients on that period in time when work stops and kids come in, or, you know, they shift to home life. Like a lot of clients in that situation of, you know, when everyone used to be in the office, when you pull into the driveway, like don't just walk right in because you're not
Yeah.
ready energetically to kind of shift. You have to make a conscious effort to kind of take the situation into consideration and say, I'm going from point A to point B, and just because the clock says whatever it says, like, doesn't mean my emotions are shifting that way.
Well, and that's like a great full circle back to how we even started this
Yeah.
conversation about just those 5 minutes, because it's like the 5 minutes, like that you're in the car before you go inside, the 2 weeks between Christmas and and into the new year, 3 weeks or whatever, like all those are is opportunities to do that, to go
Yeah.
inward and get smarter. Like you literally you're literally more efficient on the other side. Like if you take that 5 minutes in the car before you go inside, you literally walk in with different actions than
Yes.
you do when you're stressed out, and you connect with people differently. And it has this like ripple, it's like
It
dominoes,
does.
right? Like
Yeah.
it has this effect of like, oh, I walk in and I smile instead of am grumpy. And then, I connect with the person who I see instead of push them away. And then like that literally saves an hour later of figuring out some sort of argument or whatever, because I couldn't be centered when I walked in the door. So those 5 minutes, like they save us hours. It's like a
Yeah.
hard thing to prove out, but I've seen it over and
Me
over and
too.
over again.
Me too. I mean, it's the miracle morning kind of mantras, right? Like
Yeah.
when you hear about that, like how to start, like it's just basically kind of living from a place of intention. And I say that because also in the holiday season, you're going from thing to thing to thing to thing on steroids sometimes, right? Even if it's screen jumping, if you're on Zooms, right? So being able to say and kind of, it's also empowering to kind of take back that 5 minutes and say, no, everybody needs to slow to a halt. And I need 5 minutes. 5 minutes and 24 hours in a day, 5 minutes is doable. You got to sleep maybe
Well,
7 or 8 of them.
I can pretty much guarantee that every kid also needs 5 minutes.
Yes,
So
agreed.
if you're having
Agreed.
a hard time doing it for yourself, like, and it doesn't need to be on a screen, and they
Right.
might come out of their bodies for a moment, and it might be the most annoying thing. So maybe you don't take your 5 minutes at the same
Same
time.
time. Yeah.
But it's really powerful to watch. Like, I mean, it works for everybody. So it's not
Yes.
just us. It's like it's everybody. But I do find as women and moms in a house, or this can totally be for dads too, but like as the leader, as the adult in a house,
Yeah.
we can, us leading by example is just by far the most powerful way to like pass this on.
Yeah. Yeah. And leading by example in the workplace, leading by example as a parent, leading by example
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs across the board. So, you know what, Mia, this has been very helpful. And thank you so much for your wisdom, especially very timely wisdom. So can you please, well, number one, do you have any kind of last tidbits that you'd want to get across to folks?
Well, I'm just thinking about all of a sudden now I'm thinking about the workplace, and I'm
I
like, oh
know.
my gosh, like how powerful is it for like a manager or someone, an executive, to
Yeah.
like pause in a way that other people see,
Yes.
because it would make your whole team so much more efficient.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
every turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
love
and
that.
give them permission to do the same.
Yeah.
Right. It give them permission when they're in a high stakes meeting or when people are breathing down their neck to say, I need 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and to actually respect that boundary. I think the world would be a much better place in a lot of venues if that was a thing. I think I want to
Yeah.
make t-shirts that says respect the 5, right?
Yeah, so we didn't really get into like the planning, but here what I would say is like take that time for yourself. If you're like curious about really mapping out what it could look like for yourself, I would say just, or anything, the holidays, next year, whatever,
Right.
just do it on paper.
Yes.
We spend so much time in our heads, and I just find over and over again that there's just magic that happens when we get everything out of our heads and
Mhm.
onto paper. Um, and then the last thing I would say is like, you know, crazy holidays, crazy work schedules, like all the stuff that like really we spend a lot of our time with. Like if the most helpful thing I've sort of come to is that if I can really be thinking about like my health, what I put in my body, how I move my body,
Mhm.
how I take care of myself, my breath, like the pauses, if I can think of those things as a foundation for the other things, that really helps me make space for it. Cause it's like, if I don't have those things in place, the other things topple. And I think the more I make that connection in my head, it's like, oh, like, yes, I have to make this PowerPoint presentation. And yes, I want it to be good. But, you know, doing that while being dehydrated and just eating nutrition bars from the, thing, because they're right there, like that's not gonna
Right.
help me.
Right. It's
If
like
I go take,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for goodness sakes, folks. Like
yeah,
it's like meet the basic needs. And then, it's
yeah,
kind of like when they ask you in the mental health world, like, are you hungry? Are you hydrated? Are you, those basic things, or even with kids, they always say that too. Like, are they hungry, tired? Like, those other things before you just jump down the
yeah,
rabbit hole and other
nothing's too
things.
basic. I think one of the things
Right.
is we think it's so basic that we forget about, like that we
Yeah.
don't do it, but like do the basic
Yeah.
things. It doesn't even need
Yeah.
to be complicated.
No, no. I mean, instead of coffee, grab like step it down, iced tea, and then to water or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
just those basic needs that we, either don't think we deserve or we think are so simple that they don't matter. But especially in the holiday season and especially in winter, honor yourself, right? With those
Yes.
basic needs.
100%.
So tell folks you have programs coming, you have amazing resources on your website. So please tell folks where they can find you and all of that great stuff.
Awesome. So our website is plansimple.com. And I think that that's like, we're pretty good at like always having a pop up in a bar explaining
Yeah.
what's next and what's coming up. We definitely do a lot of, holiday planning stuff. So come check that out if you're stressed at the current moment about the holidays, and landing in the new year. So a lot of things around just allowing yourself to land in the new year and what that looks like. And, you know, how to make that feel really good and to not feel behind, because just like balance, all the things that we're talking about is feelings, behind is a feeling. And so
Right.
we can totally work with that and go from a place of feeling just in the right spot. And
Yeah.
so
I
that's
love
the
that.
best way to find us.
I
I
love
try to
that.
be on Instagram. It's like one of my goals. It's always part of my goals, but I'm pretty good at walking my talk and self-care. So if,
Yeah.
if water gets in the way, Instagram doesn't happen, but mostly we're there, and we have a podcast, and
Yeah.
I hope we'll be seeing Michelle on it really
Yeah,
soon. So
I hope so too. I'm psyched. I'm excited
yeah.
for that. Well, Mia, thank you. Such a, like I said, timely message, important message. I'm going to re-listen to this myself just for my own self-talk, my own self-care. So, and thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.